One of the best things about horror is the ability to take our cultural fears and translate them into a medium to face dark and intense issues in a creative and artistic manner. And when it comes to horror, urban legends and folklore are some of the main sources of inspiration. These tales are in any culture, even Black American culture. But when it comes to Black horror, due to the history of the lack of creative control over Black American culture and entertainment, it's hard to tell what is truly created from Black American culture or what's fictional. In today's video, we're gonna take a look at the origins of one of Black horror's most staple characters. Horror movies are no stranger to over exaggerations and muddying of facts. And one of the biggest examples of this is the original 1992 film, Candyman. Candyman, as much as we claim him as part of Black American culture, isn't a monster that is truly rooted in African American folklore or storytelling. Candyman's inception as a character is one that comes from many different places. He is a rather modern boogeyman whose creation is questionable. Outside of having black skin and being based in Cabrini Green, I argue that the original film doesn't dive into African American folklore, culture, or issues seriously, and it isn't until the 2021 remake that we start to see more Black American culture at the forefront of Candyman's origins. Candyman is a boogeyman that was placed in Chicago. Candyman is not something that was created by Black Americans, and it's not necessarily even a traditional story tied to Black American folklore. Candyman, for the most part, was attached to Black American culture by Hollywood. First and foremost, Candyman as a character originally appeared in Clive Barker's short story The Forbidden, which is set in Liverpool, England. He exists as an entity and his race is never mentioned, and he's said to be able to be summoned by saying his name multiple times in a mirror. Thematically, Candyman is the result of the collective unconscious of the people in the area. It was later suggested by Bernard Rose, the director and producer of 1992's Candyman, who's from London by the way, to bring the Candyman mythos to Chicago, Illinois, where the horrors of Cabrini Green were widely publicized. Then, the story was changed to fit the race narrative. For those of you unfamiliar, Cabrini Green is a housing project in Chicago, Illinois. It was famous for its crime and hostile living environment. It was a scapegoat for several failed housing projects across the nation. Cabrini Green has several real horror stories that were publicized by the media, like Ruthie Mae, Girl X, and even Dontrell Davis, just to name a few. It's very hard for me to believe that the original creation was made with the interest of Black people in mind. Although Cabrini Green is the setting and focal point of the original Candyman film, the issues of the Black people in the original film aren't explored to its maximum potential. For about the first 30 minutes, we get the sympathy of the main characters about how Cabrini Green is this awful, downtrodden place due to racism and whatnot, but that loses its focus later on in the film. It becomes more about Candyman trying to perpetuate his myth and get with his long-lost lover. You could say that the people of Cabrini Green destroyed Candyman, thus destroying the violence, but that doesn't seem like a realistic solution to the problems of Cabrini Green, especially when the origin of Candyman in the movie isn't directly tied to the place at all. And we're now assuming that he's taking his wrath out on the world. But that wrath is misguided given his myth only serves to traumatize other Black people that are going through trauma. Outside of the horrors of Cabrini Green, there are essences of other American urban legends. Candyman's hook is reminiscent of The Hook, which was a popular urban legend in the 50s, created to keep kids from fornicating in their cars on Lover's Lane. Another myth that finds its way into Candyman is the imagery of razor blades in candy. It's hard to tell what the true intent of the creation of the character was for. I wouldn't have any issue with any of this if it felt like the plot of Candyman truly wanted to dive into race issues through horror, but based off the original film and the origins, I can't say that I feel like it does. We don't even see the film through the lens of a Black character. The Black characters are secondary and indispensable. I'd argue that you could have swapped Helen and Bernadette's role in the original story and you would have gotten a stronger film. Even in the later films, where Candyman is the titular character, the black people are relegated to even less than secondary characters and just B-roll shot. And not to mention, the second film loses its black focus, but still decides to take place in New Orleans with the voodoo aesthetic. The original Candyman used black history and trauma to sell a horror film to the black audience. This would be less of a problem if the film kept its initial promise of exploring the issues of the people the titular film character shares his culture with, but it doesn't, and it just uses black culture as a backdrop. The original Candyman's origins are not as clear as they have sold it to us. It seems that everyone got so wrapped up in seeing a black face playing the coolest part of a horror movie that they forgot to question the intent, which is to make money. Although this isn't anything new in Hollywood, it speaks to the point of horror movies using culture in films without doing justice to the culture. Horror movies are some of the biggest culprits when it comes to appropriating cultures for the sake of the cool monster, but with no exploration of the culture of the people that created that said monster in the first place. But in this case, you just have random creatives inserting random cultural elements into someone else's culture for the sake of creating a scary movie. Both of these create misrepresentation. This is why Nia DaCosta's take on Candyman is important. Seeing this type of character from the mind and experience of black individuals is pivotal. In essence, DaCosta's Candyman is reclaiming an icon whose inception was questionable. Having black creatives be able to mold the mythos of Candyman adds to his legitimacy as a character within black culture. Whereas before we had this black character who was essentially created to solely appeal to black Americans, now we have a character that we can actually relate to because his origins have more color and detail to solidify him within black culture.